Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, a topic that always gets people talking, flagship smartphone cameras. I mean, specifically, how does a giant like Samsung, who's already kind of dominating the megapixel game with its Ultra series, how do they keep innovating? It's like, being at the absolute top of Mount Everest and then needing to find an even higher peak somewhere. So our focus for this deep dive is that highly anticipated camera system of the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra. We've seen the reports, the rumors, the analyses, and our mission today is basically to sift through all of that stuff to uncover what Samsung is really doing here. Is it just about, like, bigger numbers? Or is there something much more subtle, maybe more strategic at play? Honestly, it feels like Samsung might be making a bit of a calculated gamble this time around.
Oh, absolutely. It's an incredibly competitive arena out there. I mean, you've got rivals like Apple's iPhone Pro Max, Google's Pixel Pro, Xiaomi, OnePlus. They're all constantly pushing the boundaries, in hardware, computational photography, user experience, everything. So yeah, this intense environment absolutely necessitates continuous innovation from Samsung if they want to keep that top spot. And you're right, that calculated gamble is exactly what makes the S26 Ultra strategy so, well, interesting to watch. It really looks poised to blend sort of iterative hardware tweaks with some pretty significant advancements in software and design. The focus seems to be shifting towards like integrated system performance over just raw hardware numbers.
Okay, so if they're already at the top, hardware-wise, where do they even start upgrading? Let's maybe unpack the main wide-angle camera first. The rumor mill suggests it's retaining that 200 MP main sensor, the ISOCELL HP2, potentially for the, fourth year running. Now, for some people, that might just sound like Samsung is, playing it safe. But reusing sensors, some might argue that's almost a step backward for a premium flagship, right? What's your take?
Well, yeah, that's the surface view. But what's truly noteworthy here, I think, is that despite that consistent megapixel count, the sources really point towards this focus on invisible innovation. Samsung isn't just updating, it feels like they're trying to redefine innovation itself. It's maybe less about the flashy numbers now and more about mastery within the existing frameworks. Think of it like perfecting the recipe rather than just throwing in more ingredients. We're talking about anticipated internal enhancements, like an improved pixel design. The goal, capturing more light, cutting down noise, and significantly boosting dynamic range. And just to clarify for you listening, when we say ISOCELL HP2, ISOCELL is Samsung's own sensor tech. It's known for packing tons of pixels into a small space while keeping quality up. These new pixels are like tiny light-collecting buckets. We call them photodiodes, and Samsung is basically making them more efficient. Better buckets, basically.
Right, in this strategy, we're using a mature sensor. It allows for really deep optimization through software and AI. They know this sensor inside out by now.
It can also potentially cut R&D and manufacturing costs, which, frees up resources for other parts of the phone. It really suggests a strategic shift away from what used to be this relentless megapixel race.
Yeah, towards more of a computational photography race. It's not just a technical pivot. It's Samsung betting that the brain of the camera, its AI and software, will matter more to your actual photos than the lens glass itself. And that could fundamentally change how we all evaluate smartphone cameras, actually.
Interesting. Okay, so beyond the main camera, what about the wider shots? The ultra-wide. Expectations seem to be that the ultra-wide camera will just carry over the 50 MP sensor from the S25 Ultra, still giving you that wide 120-degree field of view.
Yeah, and the implications of that stability are kind of twofold. First, it signals Samsung's pretty confident in its current performance for the ultra-wide. And second, like we said, it could free up resources for other bits of the device. So any future improvements for the ultra-wide, they'll likely come from software tweaks and AI processing. Things like better distortion correction, maybe boosting the dynamic range rather than a whole new piece of hardware, right? Makes sense. And speaking of consistency, the front camera, the rumors are pretty consistently pointing to a 12 MP selfie camera.
Yeah.
And it really looks like they're sticking with the punch hole design, right? Abandoning those earlier whispers about an under-display camera, the UDC. That UDC idea was really sleek aesthetically, wasn't it? Like very futuristic.
It did, yeah. And this brings up a really important question. Why would Samsung stick with the punch hole, especially when UDC looks, well, cooler? The sources seem to suggest that current UDC technology it often suffers from compromised image quality.
Okay.
You get things like haziness, maybe reduced sharpness, and Samsung, especially for a premium flagship like the Ultra, they clearly prioritize functional performance. They want to ensure a consistent, high-quality selfie experience, even if that means having a tiny black dot on the display. Because let's face it, you expect crisp, clear selfies, not just a perfectly clean screen, right?
Yeah, good point. Okay, so if the main lens is more subtle evolution, the telephoto system,
Hmm.
this is where the S26 Ultra story gets really wild, like a battleground of conflicting possibilities. What are the main contenders floating around here?
You're absolutely right. The rumors are presenting a few starkly different options for the telephoto setup. It's quite confusing. Option one suggests they might actually axe a camera, consolidating the zoom into a single 200 MP sensor, maybe with a 4x optical zoom.
Yeah.
That's a really bold move. It's almost like a magician making an elephant disappear, relying heavily on computational tricks, digital zoom, AI.
And maybe freeing up space.
Exactly, freeing up internal space for, say, a bigger battery. But it's risky. It could alienate users who really value having those dedicated optical zoom lenses. Then you've got option two, basically reusing the 50MP 5x telephoto from the S24 and S25 Ultra, plus some kind of mystery second lens we don't know much about yet. This is seen more as the playing it safe approach. But yeah, it could genuinely disappoint fans who expect, fresh tech every single year.
Yeah, that expectation is always there.
And finally, option three. A potentially significant upgrade to a dual telephoto system, maybe jumping the shorter zoom from 3x to 3.5x with a 50MP sensor, and a really impressive surge for the periscope, maybe from 5x up to 8x magnification. The significance of these really stark contradictions, you just can't overstate it. It strongly suggests either a high degree of uncertainty or maybe active experimentation still happening within Samsung's R&D labs. This area, the telephoto, it's going to be the primary battleground for innovation, I think, and it'll heavily influence how the S26 Ultra stacks up against rivals like the next iPhone Pro Max and Pixel Pro.
Wow. That really illustrates how uncertain that path to innovation can be, even for a massive tech giant operating at this scale. It's not always straightforward. All right, so let's move beyond just the megapixel counts or that wild telephoto situation. Where are the true technological advancements maybe hiding under the hood? What's really new?
Okay, this is where it gets pretty fascinating, technically speaking. Samsung's apparently been developing advanced three-layer stacked CMOS image sensors. Now, think of CMOS as kind of the digital film or the brain of the camera, turning light into electrical signals. This new stacked design makes that brain incredibly fast. It basically separates layers for the photodiodes, those little light buckets we mentioned, and the processing circuits. And it even includes a layer of temporary memory, like DRAM.
Okay, so faster brain, what does that mean for the user?
The benefits are pretty significant, actually. Faster image processing, which means less shutter lag. Faster shooting speeds, which is great for action shots or low light. It also allows for larger photodiodes on their layer, which translates directly to better low-light performance, less noise in your pictures. Plus, higher dynamic range, meaning more detail in both the bright highlights and the dark shadows. Add to that maybe better thermal management so the sensor doesn't overheat as easily during video, and faster signal processing for stuff like burst photography.
Right.
And this ties back nicely to Samsung's whole mature approach thing. It shows where raw resolution numbers become less important than the actual efficiency and quality of capturing and processing light. This allows for tangible performance gains that you might not immediately see just looking at a spec sheet. It's about optimizing what's already there to an incredible degree.
Okay, makes sense. And what about the physical design of the camera module itself? I know consumers are always asking for more pocketable devices, so a slimmer camera module, maybe even getting rid of that camera hump. That would be huge.
Oh, absolutely. That camera bump is a constant complaint. And the groundbreaking solution they seem to be exploring involves using inkjet printed matte ink coatings instead of traditional lens film.
G-Jet, like on my printer.
Sort of, but way more advanced. These coatings are apparently much, much thinner, which allows for reducing the overall module thickness. But crucially, they still manage to mitigate lens flare and ghosting. So it really shows how design desires wanting a slimmer phone are actively driving innovation in material science. It's pretty cool. There are also those rumors about ditching the sort of Saturn ring design around the lenses for something sleeker, more minimalist.
Now, this next potential feature could be a real game changer, maybe appeal to the more pro users. The rumored return of variable aperture. We last saw that on the Samsung phone way back with the Galaxy S9 in 2018. I remember that. It was a cool idea, but it felt like it never quite took off back then. What might be different this time?
Right, it was a bit of a gimmick, perhaps, on the S9 for some, but variable aperture essentially lets the camera mechanically switch between different f-stops. That just refers to the size of the lens opening. So you could have, say, A wide f1.5 setting, lower number, wider opening, which lets in more light. Great for low light or for creating that nice blurry background effect, the bokeh.
Right, the portrait look.
Exactly. And then it could switch to maybe f2.4, higher number, narrower opening for more balanced focus across the scene, especially in bright daylight. If it is returning, the assumption, or maybe the hope, is that it's been properly upgraded to truly make a difference this time, offering more genuine optical control. It would really appeal to more advanced users, people looking for that more DSLR-like experience directly from their phone. It gives you, the photographer, more creative control before you even take the shot.
Okay, that does sound promising if they get it right. So if the hardware is, in some areas at least, potentially playing it safe, then it really sounds like the S26 Ultra is going all in on software and AI. Where's the cutting edge there?
Yeah, the software side seems huge. What's particularly fascinating is to talk about expanding virtual aperture capabilities, especially to portrait mode. And Samsung's explicit goal here, according to some reports, is to ensure that the photographic quality of the best DSLRs can be fully experienced on mobile devices. That's a big claim.
Whoa, okay.
It really highlights how AI-powered computational photography is being pushed hard to overcome the physical limitations of small smartphone sensors. Specifically, to create that realistic bokeh, that creamy, out-of-focus background that makes your subject really pop. It's actually an impressive technical feat, trying to replicate what dedicated physical lenses do purely through software algorithms.
And I've also heard about an evolution in the post-processing, how the pictures actually look after the shot is taken. The S25 Ultra apparently moved away from that, sometimes excessive over-sharpening,
Yes.
towards a more realistic look with maybe soft detail. That sounds like a really welcome change to me, less artificial.
It absolutely is. And this matters because it shows they're listening, right? It reflects a direct response to user feedback, aiming for a more natural, less obviously smartphone look aesthetic. It signals, I think, a growing maturity in Samsung's computational photography, focusing more on artistic results and, user-preferred outcomes rather than just technically perfect but maybe harsh images. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, deeper AI integration seems to be the absolute core of the strategy. AI is expected to enhance hybrid zoom, noise reduction, dynamic range, color accuracy, object recognition, basically upgrading the performance of existing hardware through smarter processing. So the S26 Ultra's camera performance will likely be less about the raw specs on paper and much more about the sophistication of its computational photography engine, all underpinned, of course, by Android 16 and the next version of One UI, probably One UI 8.
Right, so your photos will just look better, hopefully, without you even realizing all the complex AI stuff happening behind the scenes.
That's the goal, yeah. Seamless improvement.
Okay, so bringing it all together, with all these internal, maybe less visible innovations, how does Samsung position the S26 Ultra against its really fierce rivals?
Yeah.
I mean, they're facing direct competition from the iPhone 17 Pro Max, the Pixel 10 Pro, Xiaomi's next flagship One Plus, and there are rumors that competitors are making significant camera enhancements too, like maybe Apple finally putting a 48MP sensor on their ultra-wide.
Indeed, the market is absolutely ruthless. There's no room to coast.
And this brings us right back to that initial point, that calculated gamble you mentioned. This recurring theme of Samsung potentially playing it safe by reusing key sensors like the main 200MP and maybe that 50MP 5X telephoto from the S25 Ultra. It really raises a crucial question. How will consumers react? Will they perceive it as a lack of headline hardware upgrades, especially if other brands are shouting about big spec jumps? I even read one report suggesting this approach might actually backfire a bit for Samsung's market share. Do you see that as a significant risk for them?
Oh, it's absolutely the million-dollar question, isn't it? There was public sentiment data, I think, from a Phone Arena poll that showed something like 78, almost 79% disappointment at just the prospect of the telephoto reuse. Why? Because users, especially ultra buyers, expect fresh tech every year. That's the perception.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a clear risk of losing mindshare, losing that wow factor due to perceived lagging innovation, even if the AI and internal tweaks truly compensate for it in the final image quality. It's a massive marketing challenge for Samsung. How do you sell invisible innovation?
Exactly.
And just briefly touching on supply chain dynamics, there's even a rumor, kind of interesting, that the base S26 and maybe the S26 Edge might use a 50MP Sony sensor for their main camera, despite Samsung making its own excellent sensors.
Oh, interesting. Why would they do that?
Well, it highlights Samsung's pragmatic side, maybe. They seem willing to integrate best-in-class components, even from rivals, if it provides a specific advantage, perhaps better color science in Sony's case, or faster focus, or maybe just diversifying their supply chain to avoid shortages. It really shows the complex, interconnected web of the whole smartphone industry. It's not always about using only your own stuff. So ultimately, yeah, Samsung is making a calculated gamble. They clearly believe their software prowess, their AI, and those internal sensor refinements are sufficient to deliver a top-tier experience. But it's a huge marketing hurdle to convince consumers that better pixels and smarter AI are actually more impactful than seeing a brand new sensor generation or just higher numbers on the spec sheet.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it's really clear the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra's camera system isn't just going to be about those headline numbers we usually look for. It feels more like a testament to an evolving philosophy in mobile photography.
I think so. The anticipated strengths are definitely compelling. You've got potentially very strong computational photography driven by AI, that refined, more natural post-processing we talked about, enhanced low light and dynamic range coming from that advanced sensor tech, even if the megapixel count stays the same, and maybe the return of variable aperture giving more creative control. Samsung should be confident. I mean, they've often topped camera benchmarks in previous years with the Ultra line.
True.
However, the flip side, the primary concern, it really remains that perception of hardware stagnation if key sensors are largely reused. That could create a real disconnect with what consumers expect, especially those paying top dollar for an Ultraphone who want the latest and greatest fresh tech. So the pressure is really on Samsung's marketing team to educate consumers, to explain what invisible innovation actually means for the photos they take every day.
So what really stands out to you from all this? It feels like this approach, prioritizing these internal, less visible improvements, leaning heavily on software and AI, it signals a shift, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Towards a more, maybe, mature phase of smartphone camera evolution. Moving away from just raw specs towards truly optimized system performance and the overall user experience.
Yeah, I agree. And this raises a really important question, I think, for you listening. Will the market actually be ready to embrace this invisible innovation paradigm? Or will that traditional numbers game, the spec sheet wars, continue to dominate how people perceive these phones? How much do tangible, real-world improvements in photo quality actually matter compared to just seeing impressive sounding specs on paper? It's a fascinating question.
It really is. At the end of the day, the S26 Ultra's camera will be judged not just by its specifications list, but by its actual capacity to consistently capture stunning, natural, and versatile images in all sorts of conditions. It feels like a genuine test case for whether innovation can be both subtle and ultimately profoundly impactful. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out.